Hello and welcome to the coronavirus lockdown live stream, the show that brings welcome levity to the end of the world, lifting the spirits of many of you currently in self-isolation by infecting as many as possible with comfort and distraction as the apocalypse unfolds. How on earth are you all doing? There's currently, as I look at my stats, it seems that there are about 35 of you. Debbie Aquino says, hello, lockdown panel. Well, on behalf of the panel who aren't here yet, Debbie, allow me to return a hearty hello. Julia says, ready, I have actually made a live one. Looking less than live is Julia's dog, who I'm assured is not actually dead, but in fact sleeping. Ramona Moon says, hello, everyone. Mark Wetherill says, eagerly awaiting some spiritual food. Gosh, I didn't know we were in the business of delivering food of that kind. Eileen Momsen says, hi, Lloyd. James Scott Conradi, hello there. Hey, that's my line. Either my line or Obi-Wan's line, depending on whether you're a massive Star Wars fan or not. David Amstutz says hello from Vancouver Island. That is a long way away. Isabel Vidal, hello everyone, she says. Hello, Isabel. David sends greetings from Wales, where my ancestors come from. Those of you who are aware with the name Evans, actually, you can't really get much more of a Welsh name than Clwyd Evans. I do actually have it on reasonably good knowledge that my family originates from the Rhondda Valley on my father's side. So there you go, little tidbit of information for you there. Julia sends again greetings from the UK. Hal Prent, greetings from Michigan, USA. Gabrielle is in a sunny and cold Montreal. Wow, lots of comments coming through, by the way. Thanks to all of you who are joining. Nicole Mort Parker says, good morning, all from Florida. Hope all is well. And I noticed there that there is, in fact, a very topical emoji there depicting someone wearing the face mask. This is, after all, the coronavirus lockdown live stream, and we do try to touch on current developments in the world of said pandemic when we are doing our chat. Barnabas Collins says, that's actually a new avatar. You've surprised me there, Barnabas, because usually you actually have bears, don't you, on your avatar? Hey, Mr. Lloyd, good job on reminders. I love these. Reminders? Have I given reminders? Ramona Moon says, sunny Dallas here. So it's sunny in Dallas. For those of you who were wondering about what the weather is like in that part of the world, we have confirmation. Gabrielle says, we are still living the last days of the last days of the last days. Okay, fair enough. Shelley Hawkins says, Christmas weather in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, USA. Oh gosh, that doesn't sound pleasant. I can assure you it's warm and sunny in my part of the world, here in Croatia. Steve Thu says, hey everyone, will we be hearing any poetry? Well, I don't think we're going to have Sasha because it's a difficult time for those in Australia. We certainly won't have Naomi in today's show because she too is in Australia, and in Sydney it really is a ridiculous time. It's the wee small hours of the morning when everyone should really be unconscious. So we won't have, I don't think, the Australian contingent. However, I'm led to believe that Kimmy might be joining, and Kimmy is usually good for one or two limericks. So we may have the poetry corner after all. Anna Krina on Twitch says, happy Saturday from Southern California. Fantastic. A beautiful part of the world, dear to my heart. Whenever I'm asked or summoned to go to Los Angeles, I never balk at that opportunity because I always enjoy the ambience and the climate in that part of the world. Claire McKay says, hi, Lloyd, from Birmingham, UK. Hello, Claire. Ashton saying hello from Tennessee. Ren wants us to know that Florida is on further shutdown for 60 more days. Yes, this is something I've been thinking about. How long can I do the lockdown live stream in terms of it being topical and not obsolete? In other words, for how long will there be a lockdown for me to do a live stream about? And it seems, at least in Florida, well, another month. It could actually be that my hiatus from Facebook, my enforced hiatus, a ban from Facebook live streaming, comes to an end while many countries and states are still in lockdown, at which point I'll be able to hopefully spread lockdown live stream cheer far more broadly than I'm currently able to, because of course I can only do this live stream currently on Facebook and Twitch. Victoria says hello from Orlando area. Can't wait to see who is in the green room today. Victoria, currently the green room is empty. I I sense that I think Kimmy will be joining later, hopefully. If not, it's just me, I'm afraid, but we shall see. And yes, I'll be doing my reading shortly, and then we'll see where that takes us. Worst case scenario, I have to attempt at least one of the segments all by my lonesome. You do not want to see me sing. Alicia Giordano says, hey, from New Jersey, it's 11:02 a.m., not 2 a.m. like I normally catch you. Yes, Alicia, you are probably one of our most dedicated listeners, and you are not afraid to listen in and tune in, even when it's a good time for Sydney, Australia, and definitely not a good time for America. You're always there, and we appreciate having you in the chat. Vicenta Rodrigo Jimenez says, greetings from Zurich, Switzerland. Beautiful part of the world. Fond memories of Zurich. So thank you so much for tuning in. Rick Gonzalez says, may Jehovah God bless your every effort to expose his grand organization for everything they really are. Thank you very much. Yeah, I'm not sure how much, if any, involvement Jehovah actually has in my work. But, you know, the more the merrier, I guess, when it comes to supporters and backers. I'd certainly be interested to have him on the channel sometime to get his thoughts on on what his organization is doing. Rebecca Eidson says, hello, Lloyd Evans from San Diego, California. I think I've seen every video. I love your videos and live chats. Rebecca, I always get a little bit nervous when someone says, I've watched every video. And I'm thinking, every video? I mean, they're not all good. Some of them I'm pretty ashamed of. Even the one where I'm counting my New World Translations. But hey, I guess, you know, there are some Easter eggs in the back catalogue. So I guess it's worthwhile scouring the older stuff, because otherwise, how else are you going to happen upon my conversation with Tight Pants? You're just not going to find it otherwise, are you? Eric Larson says, good morning, everyone. Everyone is included in Eric's good morning from Louisiana. Shane Mechen with a fantastic avatar depicting C-3PO says, hi from New Zealand. Hello, Shane. We're really going round the world, aren't we? We've had Switzerland, New Zealand, Vancouver Island, Montreal, San Diego, and Southern California. Yeah, I'm interested to know if we can get anywhere in Asia. Is there anyone watching in Asia or anywhere like that? That'd be fascinating, wouldn't it? Robert Conway says, checking in from Ontario, Canada, where it's snowing. You see, May is no time for it to be snowing. We had a little bit of snow last month in April, just a dusting, and that was very unusual for this part of Croatia. And we were concerned that it might have affected my mother-in-law's garden, because we have a few fruit trees and they'd only just blossomed and then it snowed. I think that they've somehow survived in terms of their fruit-bearing abilities, but we shall see. We have greetings from Poland. I'm not going to attempt to pronounce the Cyrillic there, but lovely to see a viewer from Poland, given that only a couple of hours ago, if not less, I was doing some editing work on the Polish Exodus. So I'm very much looking forward to releasing that particular video. It's not finished yet, but I was really pleased with the work that I did earlier, just condensing some interviews down. What I've decided to do, by the way, because I had some fascinating interviews, and when you're doing interviews for a documentary, you kind of feel a little bit sad because you know that you can only show a tiny, tiny portion of what was said in the interview in the documentary itself, because there just isn't going to be time. If you do like a 1 hour interview and you're making, let's say, a 90-minute documentary, I'm not saying this will be 90 minutes, it's more likely to be 30, 40 minutes. But you can see how much material is going to get lost in the edit. But what I've decided to do for the Polish Exodus is to release at least some of the interviews separately after I've released the documentary. So the documentary will go up, and then in the following days, I'll post the interviews. So hopefully that will be interesting. Gabriel Spedding posits that the whole of America is coming to your live stream. I don't believe you, Gabriel. I just don't believe you. The numbers are not on your side. 70 viewers at present is impressive, but not, I'm afraid, the whole of America. David Morgan says, I'm about to be DF'd after Watchtower hunted me down for my apostate tweets. Gosh. Now that I'm officially out, I will be picking up some John Cedars merchandise. David, it sounds as though your story would be superb for the Fade Interrupted series. So please do give that some thought. If you faded from the organization and yet you were hunted down based on your Twitter activity, then maybe other viewers would like to hear about that. So, but I hope that the whole disfellowshipping process hasn't been too stressful for you. You do seem to be in reasonably good spirits, which is a good sign. And yeah, enjoy the Teespring store. Let's just see here. I hate it when the comments skip forward just as I'm going through them chronologically, and I get warped to the end of the comments, so I lose my place. Gabrielle Spedding is totally ready for Arthur's song. So it looks like I'm off the hook, provided Arthur can make an appearance in the green room. I noticed Kimmy is currently in the green room. So nice to see that I will have at least someone with me for the panel discussion later. Hal Prent says snow flurries are forecast for Michigan. Oh dear. Maria Albert says hello from New Hampshire. Amelia Anderson says, hello, I just wanted to share with you that I've just received a card from my sister in Lancashire, from my older sister, who says she will be my sister again if I go back to Jehovah's Witnesses. Is this a new program of their ministry to contact relatives? No, it isn't. It sounds like it's just a case, Amelia, of your older sister being extremely controlling, and showing really just how conditional the love of Jehovah's Witnesses is. So I'm sorry that you've had that experience. It must be quite distressing. But yeah, again, it just shows the nature of the organization and the nature of the love that they have, or that they attempt to have. But let's go to our reading, shall we? I'm currently reading from Take Back Your Life, Recovering from Cults and Abusive Relationships by Janja Lalich and Madeline Tobias. I am in chapter 7, Taking Back Your Mind. In the last lockdown live stream, we were dealing with loaded language. And this time, we will be learning about floating and other altered states. This sounds fascinating. I'm not sure how much of it will be relevant to Jehovah's Witnesses, but it's good to get a broader reading of what's going on with cults and what sort of shenanigans they rope people into. Another common post-cult difficulty is learning how to deal with the disconcerting phenomenon of floating, also referred to as trancing out, spacing out, or dissociation. Sometimes people float back and forth between their pre-cult and cult personalities. Families will report relief at seeing the return of their loved one's spontaneity, sense of humor, and lively personality, only to experience confusion and anxiety when the veiled, flat, suspicious cult persona re-emerges. Former members of groups that use a lot of chanting, speaking in tongues, intense group criticism, hypnotic and guided imagery sessions, and meditation or other trance techniques frequently experience floating episodes. Floating occurs because the mind has been trained and conditioned to dissociate during those practices, and so under certain conditions, a person so trained may involuntarily slip into a dissociated state. Depending on the cult's practices, dissociative episodes can include unpleasant or bizarre hallucinations and may cause considerable anxiety. Dissociation can and does occur in the general population and ranges from mild daydreaming to the extreme of multiple personality disorder. Post-cult dissociative symptoms are manifested in a variety of ways. When floating, you feel disconnected from your environment or body, concentration becomes difficult, attention span shortens, and simple activities become major tasks. The need to make even minor decisions may produce confusion and panic. You lose your grasp on reality, but like other difficulties, this too will pass. The next chapter contains some exercises to help you combat these uncomfortable and disorienting experiences. Moderate to severe cases of floating, known as depersonalization or depersonalization disorder, involve a sense of separation or detachment from your body. It feels as though you leave your body and float above yourself, watching yourself think, behave, and interact with others. In some groups, depersonalization is regarded as the highest state of consciousness, and members strive mightily for it. In reality, depersonalization is crippling and has no advantages for functioning in the world. Derealization is another form of dissociation. In depersonalization, the self seems unreal. In derealization, the world seems unreal. Surroundings may seem lifeless, foggy, distant, or flat. Derealized people may see vibrant auras around inanimate objects, which may appear larger or smaller than they really are. Occasionally, derealization and depersonalization happen at the same time. Either state may be accompanied by visual or auditory hallucinations, often related to the cult's belief system. Some former devotees may see or hear gods, demigods, or other cult-related entities or phenomena long after they have left the cult and stopped meditating or engaging in whatever practice induced those states. Some groups, for example, teach that thoughts do not leave an impression on the mind, like drawing a line on water. This is a direct post-hypnotic suggestion for amnesia. Members are taught to attain a state of non-attachment. They are told, do not become attached to your thoughts. Let your thoughts flow over you. A thought comes, a thought goes. It is not something to be concerned with. After such training, many former members have only spotty recall of their time in the group and are easily triggered into dissociating and dropping back into cult-learned behaviors. Without proper counseling, they may be unaware of the cause of their dissociative post-cult behaviors. This impaired recall, known as source amnesia, is quite common among people who have experienced dissociative or derealized states in cults. Giving a meditator specific or veiled instructions on exactly what to look for while in a trance state is the equivalent of post-hypnotic suggestion. In recognition of this demand expectation, there is a saying among therapists that Freudian patients dream in Freudian symbolism, while Jungian patients dream in Jungian symbolism. In cult-led meditation, the appearance of certain desired images or phenomena is interpreted as a sign of progress by the leadership and thus by the members. Constant dissociation caused by meditation or other practices can increase a person's vulnerability to suggestion and direction. Indoctrination by direct or indirect suggestion can occur at susceptible times immediately before and after these mind-altering practices. Direct or indirect suggestion and dissociative states prevent followers from questioning or judging cult tactics. Sweeping statements such as "Master always has a good reason" or "Master teaches on many levels" can then be accepted as universal explanations for all behavior. Trance-inducing practices associated with meditation are found in most Eastern and New Age groups. Chanting, speaking in tongues, guided visualization, prayer, decreeing, and repetitive physical movements such as spinning may lead to trance states or altered states of consciousness. Most political cults and self-improvement, New Age, religious, and psychotherapy cults conduct lengthy and extensive criticism sessions that can produce dissociation and floating effects. Also, dissociative symptoms are a frequent after effect of witnessing or participating in traumatic events such as violent acts or physical or sexual abuse. Usually, the dissociative episodes caused by cult practices and experiences are temporary, heartening news if you are suffering from them, but may last as long as several months. Eventually, they should diminish in frequency and duration. I have been reading further into chapter 7, Taking Back Your Mind, in the book Take Back Your Life, Recovering from Cults and Abusive Relationships by Janja Lalich and Madeline Tobias. Isn't that bizarre? You do, the more you study cults, the more you realize that, you know, our collective Jehovah's Witness experience may have been appalling, but gosh, it could have been worse. You know, if the governing body were able to capitalize on all of these different kind of mind-altering techniques, I'm not saying that they don't manipulate people, but certainly in those sorts of ways where you're making people dissociate from themselves, gosh, I'm glad that I don't struggle with that sort of thing. Kimmy, to the live stream. How are you, Kimmy?
I'm well. Thinking about...
You're not dissociated, are you, in any way, shape, or form?
What'd you say?
You're not dissociated or having an
no
realization of any kind.
Your audio kind of cut wobbly sounding, Lloyd.
Is it really?
Yeah.
Oh dear.
You're better now.
Okay.
Okay.
Well, let me know the audio is a problem again. So yes, just commenting there on how cult tactics can vary from cult to cult, and in some ways, I'm glad that at least I don't have to worry about out-of-body experiences and that kind of thing.
Yeah, I would think too, some of that happens when you have people in these long sessions and information overload. It overloads your senses. And so we did have that at times as Jehovah's Witnesses. Then also that kind of hypnotic state where it's a repeat of information that then you repeat back, and then they repeat, the way that the Watchtower study and that question and answer. So some of those kind of techniques, when you look at it, were applied not only to these other cults, but also we experienced it as well.
Indeed.
But no out-of-body floating experiences.
Thank goodness. So yeah, the few comments coming through here. Nice to see Heather Bennett. Heather is actually the granddaughter of the late Guy Pearce. Good morning, everyone. Lloyd, can you believe it's been 6 years since my grandpa passed? I sometimes wonder if he's watching from above, but then I realize that I don't believe in that. Still trying to get the brainwash out of my head. After 8 years free, it's been awesome to watch your growth in the last 6 years that I've known you. That's very kind, Heather. I still remember with fondness meeting up with you in Seattle back in 2017. But yeah, it's amazing how time flies. I doubt that your grandfather is watching from above. I've always thought, I don't know what you think, Kimmy, that the teaching of anything really happening in the afterlife is rather disconcerting because, well, in the Jehovah's Witness context, of course, you believe that your loved ones are going to be in the future in paradise waiting for you, which can be disconcerting if you apostatize from the religion. You're essentially the memory of your loved one is being held hostage. And then another thought that other religions have is that they, of course, float up to heaven and they're looking down on you. And I found that a little bit creepy as well, the thought that they're observing your life from afar and unable to have any involvement in it whatsoever. It's like being shunned eternally, isn't it?
Right. And how could that be loving,
Exactly.
And you're not given a choice in the matter.
Yeah.
But for me, it was always, they still use it. A lot of people, if they don't get that programming out once they leave, they feel like they're letting their families down, they're letting their loved ones down, and they use the grief that you were going through to kind of keep you in and keep you controlled. I know I experienced that when Steve died, and that's why it's so important to do some research and to do some therapy when you leave, and even reading books from ones like Yana, understand all of those methods. But yeah, it's kind of creepy. And then of course, when you were in, you also believe that your loved ones that didn't die would die at Armageddon, and you never see them again. I had that with my father and my brother and my sister. That was a kind of awful experience. Always hoping that my dad would die from a heart attack so he could be resurrected and have a chance in the new system.
Yeah, it's crazy, isn't it? What the resurrection teaching leads to in your mind. Arthur, are you taking us on another tour of your hometown?
Yes. Hi, everyone. Hi, Lloyd. Hi, Kimmy.
Hi, Arthur.
And hi to all of our viewers. Well, yeah, I'm still out of my my domicile. And
is that a posh way of saying you're not in your house at the moment?
Exactly.
Okay.
And I'm on my way home.
Okay. Well, thank you for tuning in.
So yes, I will show you. I will show you another. Well, let me. Yeah, that's. Hey, how can I turn my
Yeah, you're
my
not on landscape, unfortunately.
Yeah, that's the problem. So I will show you a different part of Aradia in the forthcoming moments.
Okay, look forward to it. Kimmy, we have had a request from Gabrielle.
Oh yeah, Lloyd's here. I mean Lloyd. I'm renaming my cat Lloyd. Charlie's here. Let me grab him.
You just can't beat having cats on videos, can you? I do sort of understand why YouTube wants everyone's videos to be like this. There we go. It's a little bit like, have you seen the SNL sketch "Whiskers Are We"? This portion of the video.
It's the best portion of the video. Look at the camera, Charlie.
Hello, Charlie.
Yeah, we're in the guest room, otherwise known as Lloyd's room, and he decided he wanted to take a nap on the bed.
Fair enough. Probably pining for my return.
He is. Jessica. He likes Jessica.
Oh, really? Okay, maybe Jessica's return then.
Yeah.
We might be getting a cat soon because Deanna was in conversation with one of the neighbours the other day, and it turns out they have 3 new kittens.
Ooh,
of various colours. So I've sort of been strong-armed into accepting one of them into our home. So expect a cat in the bunker at some point in the not too distant future.
You need your own crazy cat mug there, Lloyd.
I do. It seems I'm joining the crazy cat crew. Nice to see Brandon in the live chat. Brandon, you do have a link. You can join us if you want.
Hi, Brandon.
There was an older gentleman artist at Patterson who claimed to be one of the anointed and was known for telling people that after his passing, if they felt a swift kick in the pants, that would be him. Gosh, it wasn't, what's his name? Boyle, was it? I remember meeting, was it Alan Boyle? He was quite the character, so many stories. I remember going to Patterson in 2003, and one of my most vivid memories of Patterson, other than going up to the dining room and our guide was pointing to the hillside, and he was saying, "You see those houses on the horizon?" So I said, "Yeah," and he said, "That's where our lawyers and doctors live." And I remember that conversation, and I also remember being taken down into the art department and meeting, I believe he's since died, but I think his name was Alan Boyle, and he also comes from the northwest of England. I think he came from Liverpool originally, or thereabouts, Merseyside, which is where my father comes from. So we had a little bit of a speech from him on how he mixed his oils and that sort of thing, and his creative process, which I did actually find very interesting. But maybe I'm barking up the wrong tree, and there we go. Alan Boyle. It was Alan Boyle. So yeah, wow, that's a very interesting anecdote about Alan. I believe he actually appeared briefly on a JW Broadcasting episode, but I don't remember them regaling us with that particular story. Brandon, jump on the show. Come on. If you're in the comments, you might as well come on the lockdown live stream itself. So I'm now scouring for more comments. JTL Graziano, whose name I always enjoy saying, on Twitch says, "Hi, just joining this morning. Has anyone in the US noticed the recent Dateline episodes with so many cult ties?" Well, I have someone actually in the US on the live stream. Kimmy, do you know what JTL Graziano is referring to?
I do not.
Okay.
So making me have to look that up, or of course Mark probably would know.
Yeah. And is Mark quite busy at the moment?
He's not. He hasn't decided yet if he's joining on yet.
Okay, fair enough.
Resting in his office watching some CNN or something.
Well, we are kind of talking about doing a Watchtower in Focus soon, so probably it's best for him to save his thunder for that, because there's been so much stuff happening, hasn't there?
Yeah, he's been at his desk quite a bit. Lots of legal stuff. He's downloading, researching, working on an article, getting some stuff together for some lawyers. It's a lot going on. That's
not to say that he wouldn't be welcome, by the way. I'm just saying that if he weren't to come, it would be fully understandable.
But not for Brandon.
Yeah, Brandon has no excuse, and I have this very cryptic message from him saying, "Damn it, is he struggling technically with joining? I've no idea."
It is earlier there where he lives, right? It's 8:30 a.m. It's 11:30 a.m.
Yeah, but come on, he can throw a t-shirt on.
And he's a morning person. So.
No one's going to see what's happening underneath the desk. No one can see what's happening under my desk, and it's a good job too.
You're not wearing pants.
Gabrielle says, Lloyd, you could still do a live stream after the lockdown and call it something else. We always enjoy chatting with you and your panel friends. Yeah, I'm not saying I wouldn't do it after the lockdown. I'm just saying it would be interesting to know how long the lockdown live stream can still be relevant for, in terms of how long the lockdown's going to go on for. Even after the lockdown has ended, I'm interested in continuing this format in some form, although part of the purpose of this live stream is to just provide people with a little bit of company and a little bit of levity in very disturbing times. And I don't think there would be a need for it to be like a couple of times a week, which is what we're doing at the moment.
So what's going on in Croatia, Lloyd? Are they lifting your stay-at-home order, or?
So, what's the latest? So there's been a number of phases, and I think on Monday, we're going to learn about potentially phase 3 being the lifting of the restriction where you can't travel to different counties. So at the moment, we're technically not allowed to get in our car and drive to Zagreb, even though Zagreb's only an hour away, because Zagreb is in a different county. And this is also stopping us from going to the coast, because usually around this time of year we would go to the coast for an early trip there. But we're going to find out tomorrow whether those restrictions have been lifted. Diana is just a little bit what's the word? She's not too sure how they're going to deal with Split, because apparently, even though Croatia is on the whole doing very well with its numbers, if there is a hotspot in terms of infections, it's currently Split, which is on the coast, and it's usually Split that we would go to for our getaways. So, I mean, there's always other places that we can go. I'm actually interested in going to Pag, because Pag, it turns out, is where Toni Morris's ancestors come from.
That's funny.
And I'm thinking about kind of getting my investigative journalist head on and trying to hunt down some of his surviving distant relatives and maybe sit them down and force them to watch.
I had found his brother. I have to find all that information. I had done a little hunt on him before. I had some family members I had located for Toni Morris. I never reached out to them. I was going to. But sorry. So in Maryland, it's weird in the United States. We have different states doing different things, and which affect everybody in a general sense. So Maryland, we've opened our tennis courts, our golf courses, our beaches for exercise. And we're like in a phase kind of 0. Our stay-at-home order is supposed to expire on Sunday. They're going to obviously do something where they're going to extend that, and then they're going to start phased approaches to reopening. Our governor is extremely careful. He's watching the numbers to make sure we don't spike before we open stuff up.
So do you think you're still going to be, do you think the stay-at-home order is going to be extended for Maryland?
I think for a small period, he said that he's going to. And then what they do open, it's only going to be pockets of things to see how we do. I know people are anxious to get back to work, and then everything's going to be different. So restaurants are going to reopen in phase 1, like with 25% occupancy. They're trying to close city streets so that restaurants can set up outside seating so that you don't go in the restaurant. So he flew in 500,000 masks from South Korea for Maryland and has them under guard to make sure the federal government doesn't take the masks at Maryland.
Really?
Yeah, his wife is from South Korea, and she helped to negotiate a deal, and they flew the plane directly to BWI. 500,000 masks. They're hidden in a special location that not many people know, and we have the National Guard that is basically policing them to make sure the federal government doesn't come and take our masks.
That is. I mean, obviously, as a Brit, you have to understand how weird it is that you have like the state governor worried about what the federal government is going to do. It's
because they've done it to New York. I think they did it to California. They may have done something like that to Washington State. It's very strange for Americans to experience this as well. So sometimes we do have the good is coming out in people. They're helping neighbors. They're getting food for elderly people. They're checking on one another. So they're doing non-distancing socialization, coming together. And then you have this kind of infighting. Then you have the running jokes like the state of Florida and the state of Georgia, opening all this stuff up too soon. We'll just see what happens. I'm just protecting myself and my family, trying to keep my father alive, and
Absolutely. Gina Marie says, in Illinois here outside Chicago, we're in lockdown till end of May. People aren't listening, and word is might go through June. Yeah, of course, lockdowns are only as helpful as the extent to which they're observed, I suppose. Arkansas, which I now know how to pronounce, is safer at home. Barbershops, etc., reopened by appointment only May 6th. And we have another panelist. Here he is.
We get
Brandon. You see, that's what happens when you make comments. I'm going to pull you on.
The damn it meant you had to join?
Yeah. It's like, oh, I got to get up. Yeah. No, it's okay. We had a lazy Saturday morning going on here. Finished
at what state of
was making some breakfast.
At what state of undress were you in when you were commenting
I was
about
dressed.
the
the streaming stuff was just not set up, so I had to get all the technical pieces in order. Yeah,
but
he was a character, though. My goodness, so many stories.
Yeah,
throwing tea bags.
He seemed like a character
table.
in the brief moment that I met him. So, what more can you tell us about Alan Boyle?
Yeah, he made his own paints. I mean, it was super eclectic. Like, pretty. He could be a nice guy, and then you heard stories where he just like went off on people if they weren't paying attention to him. He was a bit that way, throwing tea bags at people across the table because they wouldn't pass the hot water for lunch and stuff like that. So yeah, he was one of those older guys that got away with a lot of stuff because he was older and as well as a amazing artist. He had some pretty cool stuff. He crushed up glass in his paints like Rembrandt and did all kind of crazy stuff like that. But he was lots of stories there. The one about kicking folks he's like, oh, one of these days you're going to be walking along and you're going to get a swift kick in the pants. That would be me. Oh boy.
There was also, didn't he do the voice for some kind of there was like an animated thing. I'm fascinated to see whether it makes it onto JW Broadcasting eventually, because it was like an animated stop motion thing where they were showing people witnessing on a street, and he did like the voiceover for it.
Yeah, the claymation one.
Yeah,
Mulberry Street or something.
Mulberry Street, that's the one. Yeah.
Yeah.
It's another day on Mulberry Street.
Right, that
sort of thing,
Yeah. There was a lot of little like side projects that art department AV did like that. You'd for family night stuff. It was probably a family night thing.
Yeah,
would be my guess. And those were notorious for leaking, and then people getting in trouble for leaking them. But yeah,
I'd be interested to know whether they still devote AV resources to doing that now that the audio visual is such a big part of the operation. Whether they're just too busy doing the vast, what is now the majority, you could argue, of the quote unquote spiritual food, or whether they do still do the occasional thing for the Bethel family nights.
Yeah, I don't know. I wouldn't be surprised. It was kind of the release. People can get their creative wiggles out, is what we used to say. So yeah. I'm pretty sure they probably do. And it's also kind of a little bit of an audition type thing, because I know several people who did stuff for family night that ended up getting pulled up to AV later on. So there's a bit of that too. It's kind of like, oh, check out my my stuff. I got it included in Family Night. It passed the judges to get included in Family Night, and then
isn't Family Night a bit competitive as well?
Oh yeah.
Yeah. So
yeah. But
Did you ever
they
do
didn't
anything
call
on
it
Family
that,
Nights?
of course. No, I didn't. Enjoyed several of them. There was always this weird thing where some folks were like, "Oh, Family Night," and they'd roll their eyes, and then some people were like, "Oh, Family Night's amazing." I knew people that were the grips and stuff for it. There were some cool ones. There was a lot of dancing. Sometimes you go into, like, one time we were in the Patterson auditorium, and I forgot what the song was. It was like this not acapella, just acoustic version of some song that was really popular at the time, and I was like, I cannot believe they're playing this right now. I'll have to think of the name of it later, but stuff like that was weird and slipped in, and everybody were drinking beforehand, so it was kind of a loosey-goosey thing there. But then it was like, oh no, don't clap, and people are dressed up, so it was weird. It was this very conflicting thing, but interesting times.
A few more comments coming through about lockdown restrictions. In New Jersey, no date in sight yet for ending it, and hairstylist, I believe. I don't know whether that means Alicia is a hairstylist, but yeah. Amanda says they confiscated PPE from Massachusetts in the New York port. They then sent the Patriots plane to get things directly to Massachusetts. They then shared some with New. I just find that bizarre, the way they kind of they're kind of cannibalizing different states for their stuff. That's crazy. Couldn't imagine that happening in the UK. Mitch Jander says Grand Rapids, Michigan is survived the last day of the last days because of Lloyd's support group. We love you guys. That's very kind. Thank you, Mitch. Jay Proctor says Germany made some things more restrictive, masks required in public, but is also opening things up like playgrounds, car dealerships, etc. Victoria Roberts says in the UK we are waiting for Boris to tell us what the plan is at 7 p.m. tonight, about 2 hours from now. Vicky Griffin Dane with a slightly more profound thought. This is a good time to figure out what you want your new normal to be. This is an excellent time to evaluate your life now and what you want for your future. Some things we may not want to go back to. It's all what we make it. I'm kind of hoping that will apply to some Jehovah's Witnesses, and that they'll realize that it might give them an opportunity to just take a step back and think, hang on, is there something in my life that needs to change moving forward?
Yep. Give them some time to themselves to think.
Alicia confirming that she is a hairstylist. Thank you.
Mark made a hair appointment, Lloyd, for 3 weeks from now. He reached his barber. He said he's closed, but they let him make a hair appointment for 3 weeks. So that's what we're looking at. Maybe in 3 weeks, we can get haircuts. I
could really do with a haircut, although probably, as you can imagine, my hair does its own thing anyway. So
I told Mark it's opportunity to grow it out. He likes to keep it short.
Indeed. I did actually have to do a DIY job at one point because it was properly going into my eyes. But fortunately, I didn't mess up too badly. Bob Oak says, and what top-notch company you are during lockdown. All my favorite apostates, along with my most definitely favorite apostate wannabe. Oh, I think you mean Arthur. Oh, we don't know where Arthur is. He's disappeared again.
I hope he didn't have an accident.
Goodness knows.
Was he still on his bike?
I don't think his neighborhood is that rough, to be honest. But who knows what might have happened? I mean, maybe a meteor landed on him, for all we know.
Yeah.
So yeah, hopefully Arthur will be rejoining at some point, because I'm kind of interested to see what he has in mind for the Sing Along with Arthur section. Speaking of the segments, Kimmy, can I trouble you for a limerick?
Sure. I took 2 minutes and wrote one when I was in the bathtub earlier. I just got to pull it up.
Fantastic. So. In that case, I will roll the intro.
Lloyd, I'm still looking for it.
No pressure.
Well, yeah, I took a screenshot of it. Okay, I found it.
Okay.
Corona's the name of a beer. When heard, brings about fear. If you get sick, get better quick. Let's hope for a much better year.
Fantastic. Excellent. Keeping up the standards, even in Sasha's absence. We have an excellent limerick there for us. Don't suppose I could trouble you for a limerick, Brandon.
Oh boy, no.
It's kind of a specialist skill, I think.
Yeah, I think so.
I need
I think you use the word skill pretty lightly.
I need a good while to come up with limericks, but I do enjoy them. Eileen Monson says barbers and hairdressers have already started working in Portugal. So Portugal's the place to go if you need your haircut. Eric Larson suggests that Arthur is still out in field service. He would probably like to be, because I suspect that he secretly craves to actually be a Jehovah's Witness. But I doubt that they would let him in, to be honest. He's just a little bit too apostate for their tastes. Rianne says that she cuts her husband's hair. Good for you, Rianne. So at least Rianne's husband is getting haircuts. Let's just see here. Victoria's saying this is tomorrow. Boris is telling the plan. The bank holiday messed my brain up. I lose all track of bank holidays now, Victoria. When you work for yourself in another country, no less, and Croatia has a lot of public holidays as well, so they frequently take me by surprise. I'll drive into town and think, why is it a ghost town? Oh, it's another public holiday. Okay. Look who's with us.
Oh, look.
Morning, Mark.
Chugging away at something that is disguised as not alcohol. It is
sparkling probiotics. Sweet.
It's good stuff. Let's see. This is lemon ginger.
Oh, very nice.
Yeah, Mark likes kombucha. Yeah, something like,
You'll probably get some comments online about that.
Are you trying to get sponsored?
Well, I am actually looking to make this video more monetizable. So perhaps you could give us a product review of the lemon ginger probiotic.
Let's see. What can I do? What can I say about this? Sparkling probiotic drink. Ad Kavita, we believe in vitality. Welcome to a delicious way to boost your day and wake up your senses. Refresh with Kavita Sparkling Probiotic Drink. It's the official drink of the Lloyd Evans John Cedars channel. Approved by apostates everywhere.
This broadcast is approved by the John Cedars channel. Yeah, fantastic.
Let the offers roll in.
So we were just saying before, Mark, that JW Survey has been inundated, you in particular, with all sorts of stories in the past 2 or 3 days, and we're currently discussing doing a Watchtower in Focus early next week to go through some of this material.
Right.
So I don't want to kind of overlap too much, but is there anything that you kind of want to get off your chest, or are you going to keep things to yourself? How are we going to play this?
Yeah. So, well, the only thing I can really keep to myself, and man, do we all, especially me, look pasty white here, and Kimmy's right about, and it's like I need the haircut. I called my haircut salon, and it's going to be 3 weeks before I can get in, but they might open sooner because we've had Maryland restrictions just slowly starting to lift.
I think go for a ponytail.
You think so?
Shake things up a little bit.
Kimmy's got plenty of those hair ties. I can
exactly
put them
maybe
back there.
Tails.
So we're kind of hitting the saturation point here with these child abuse cases, and so I'm not going to go into too much of that today, because it's just like I don't want it to be a thing where that's all I talk about and that's all that's on my mind, because it's certainly not. It's very important. I made a Facebook post a couple days ago about the second Montana case to be filed in 2 weeks. And I did mention, I think last time we were on Livestream, that Montana has a law that went into effect partly due to the original Montana case from 2018, the JW case. So the Montana governor signed into law that there's a statute of limitations extension that will happen so that people that were previously barred from getting justice or seeking any kind of compensation about a cover-up of child abuse or anything related to that can go ahead and file their cases. And the deadline was May 6th. So that deadline has come and gone. But just prior to the deadline, those two significant cases in Montana were posted to the court, and the complaints were filed. And so I think we talked about maybe the first one very briefly, where you have two sisters that came forward about their father. I can mention the name because it's all public. It's Bruce Mapley Sr. These are all allegations, by the way, but the two sisters came forward. But then it started to come out that, and I knew this ahead of time, but until the second case was filed, even I didn't realize, the investigators had told me, I didn't know how many elders, ministerial servants were involved in this case. In the first case, we have a former elder named James Rowland that came forward and said, hey, not only was this guy, Bruce Mapley, Jr., abusing children, girls in the congregation, but there was a whole bunch of them that were. And when it was brought to the attention of the chief elder, Martin Sensen, it turns out that he had been abusing children as well. And then a second case came out I think it was a Friday, May 1st, or whatever date that fell on. A second case in Montana came forward where this man, Mr. Rowland, he had 3 daughters that he said were all being abused. And he went to the elders about it, and they covered it up. And so it did not surprise me that 2 of his daughters have themselves filed a lawsuit against the organization and the congregation in Hardin, Montana, Watchtower, Pennsylvania, Watchtower, New York. So they've filed a lawsuit. And in that lawsuit, it's far worse. And we're going to talk about it next week. But it's far worse because that case names a whole lot of additional individuals in what the attorneys and investigators seem to be calling. They don't call it this I don't know if they call it this in the documents, but they, referring to it as a pedophile ring. And I say that because they even identified the chief elder, Martin Sensen, as a man who built a wing in his home. When he built a new home, he built a room in his room for the purpose of abusing children. This is the allegation. And so, I mean, it just honestly, to anyone that just doesn't study these cases thinks, well, that's kind of far-fetched to accuse a person of doing that. But if you think about the mind of a predator and a person who may have money, ability, position in the congregation, especially a small town, like I think Hardin, Montana, and by the way, I've been contacted by inside people very similar to the way it happened in Arkansas. People from inside have reached out to me, and I'm not going to discuss that in any detail at all. But to say that to understand the mind of a predator is to understand that a person with influence in the congregation, whether it's Jehovah's Witnesses, Catholic Church, or otherwise, we've seen that play out in the Catholic Church, how priests have this level of control and influence. And if you watch the movie Spotlight, you saw those references to, oh my God, this guy was like a god. He was, when the priest said, he's going to come and take care of you, you were like speaking to God. So the same thing is with the Jehovah's Witnesses. You have circuit overseers, you have congregation coordinators, presiding overseers, service overseers, all these men that I am absolutely, as long as I'd been in the organization, it still shocks me to find out how many of these men have been involved in these cases and how it's been covered up, not just by their own local elders, but by the organization itself. They knew, and they covered it up. And all of this is coming to a head. So we have the second case now. We have a whole lot of former elders, ministerial servants, and others, and even a few not connected to the organization who've been implicated in this case. We're going to be talking about that on Watchtower in Focus. So that's, I don't know to call it a teaser or not, because it's a dark subject. But the
It's
good
not an
thing,
episode I'm looking forward to be honest, but I do think it's important that I do think the Watchtower in Focus format serves an important means of documenting what's happening, and just making sure that we are planting a flag whenever we hear about these stories and giving them the attention that they deserve. We were talking off air about this on WhatsApp, Mark, you and I, and I'd be interested as well in Kimmy and Brandon's thoughts. It does just feel to me as though with every wave of publicity we get, we had the Atlantic article that featured Mark and Kimmy. We've had the Leah Remini Aftermath special. We've had the documentary in Canada, I believe. We've had the witnesses on Oxygen. And it just doesn't surprise me if with every kind of successive wave of exposure, Watchtower's defenses get weakened a little bit, because what happens is victims watch this exposure and realize that their experience isn't unique, and realize that it's all part of the same situation, and they maybe get emboldened to step forward and do something about it. Do you think that's possibly happening?
Snowball effect. Yeah.
It's absolutely happening. Well, there's going to be another case. So look, the thing is, these Montana cases have just popped up, but while that's all happening, I've had numerous cases. So I mentioned the Facebook post, which I made about 2 days ago, and that just started kind of blowing up on me. I even had witnesses commenting on that post, and I started getting a lot of people reaching out to me for many different reasons, either to say they knew someone involved in one of these cases to help substantiate what happened, or reaching out to say, hey, I'd like to help. How can I help in whatever way possible? I just was really shocked. I mean, I might make a post about something and it gets mild attention, but then when you strike a nerve, when you post something about this serious of a matter with the witnesses in the organization, I mean, it triggers people, because in studying these cases, I don't think I've just found any other common denominator than the misuse of sex that is, child abuse, the misuse of, how can I say it? Within the Jehovah's Witness organization, it is like a breeding ground of these things. And I didn't want to believe it as a kid. I was surrounded by it. And I thought, well, and I think Kimmy thought the same thing too, maybe you and Brandon, but, I saw, well, it's kind of isolated incidents. You have some real bad people. But, I mean, we know dozens and dozens of kids that were, even within their own pedophile rings, meaning, kids get abused and then they grow up to be teenagers, and then they start abusing other kids. And it's a vicious cycle. And one of the reasons that the witnesses are such an insular society is that they trust their kids with each other. They say, well, you can't associate with outside worldly kids, non-Jehovah's Witness kids. So you got to be with your brothers and sisters. So they put them off in a room many times. Not all parents do this, but they let them party together. They let them have sleepovers and things. And as long as they're witness kids, they all get together. And what a lot of people don't realize is that they're going off into closets and, they're playing truth and dare. And then one thing leads to another. And because so much of it is unsupervised, we've seen a tremendous amount of unhealthy sexual behavior that has happened within, children, because the parents just think, well, they're, they don't get much association outside of the organization. So we're going to let them have their fun. But they don't really know what's going on. And then when the elders do find out, it gets covered up and they handle it internally. So as a result of some of these posts that I've made recently, you wouldn't believe the stuff. Some of it I can't even talk about that's coming out now. There's one I won't even mention the state, but there's four Jehovah's Witnesses, one an elder and his pioneer wife, and the other one as another couple in the congregation that came out of this one particular congregation that when the elder discovered that a man had moved from another state to his state and his congregation, and there were suspicions about him being a child abuser, this elder went into the congregation records and unsealed that blue envelope and pulled out all the documentation, and it just shocked the living, I don't even want to say it, out of him. He realized that this man who had moved in from another state, I'm going to be writing an article about this, so I'm not going to say a whole lot more right now, but this man, this former elder, actually, he moved in as an elder to this southern United States state. He moved in as an elder and a pioneer, carried his own recommendation letter, and it ended up being sealed inside of this document until suspicions arose with this one Jehovah's Witness elder who went in there and opened the copied all the documents. We have all the documents. And so let's just say that, we're getting the proper authorities involved in this case, because it's not just the cover-up that occurred in the other state, it's the cover-up that occurred in the state that this man moved to. So they say, Jehovah's Witnesses say, they have this policy where they inform congregation members that if there's a predator in their midst, the service department has the option, not automatic, the option to tell the elders to inform parents that there's a child predator in their midst. Most often, they don't take advantage of that. And so you had an entire congregation or multiple congregations that didn't know that this man was a sexual predator and who was about 10 or 11 years ago disfellowshipped for sexually abusing multiple boys who were questioned for being complicit in the act. And that's a whole nother thing. The Willing Participant Act. You have a young baptized teen witness and the organization says, first and foremost, were you a willing participant in what this person did?
Yeah, that's language out of the Shepherd book, isn't it? Willing participant. JTL Graziano says, how awful. This should highlight how much the JW org is a paradise for pedophiles. They need to be forced into transparency. Julia Dasmin says, Jehovah looks after the real estate company but turns a blind eye to the trauma of innocent children. Annika P. or Pia says, Mark, I have so much admiration for you being able to go through all the details of so many cases. I used to review convicted sex offender cases and they leave a shadow on your brain. Thank you for all you do. It certainly does, speaking from my own experience, and Mark goes through this material far more than I do, but to the extent that I've been dealing with this material over the years, I can attest to that. It does eat away at your soul to deal with this subject matter. JTL Graziano adds, it helps us to get the facts that we can in turn share with our JW family members who are in denial that these things are happening. Bob Oak says charitable status should be revoked until they fix this and they respect the human right of freedom of religion. It's disgusting how they break up families. Gina Marie says, Mark, thank you for your hard work. Was able to talk briefly to my witness mother about the Australian Royal Commission. She's asked more questions about all of this lately. Actually, I was saying earlier how today I've been editing the Polish Exodus, and one of the things that came up during my trip to Poland was that the Australian Royal Commission had an impact there, because some of the people who are now on the front lines doing public protests in the streets of Warsaw. So they're not, well, they do protest at conventions, but they just pop up in Warsaw, and their objective is to warn the public as ex-Jehovah's Witnesses about the organization. And speaking to two of these people separately without having any opportunity to influence them on what their reply would be, both of them said that the Australian Royal Commission played a major part in them waking up, because they could see, watching the footage, particularly with Jeffrey Jackson's testimony, that there was some real double standards going on in the organization. Mark, I mentioned earlier about the Atlantic article and, the waves of exposure. And you mentioned earlier that, we don't want to discuss too much about the stories that you're working on. We want to save things for the Watchtower in Focus. I'm just wondering more broadly whether, especially now that I have you and Kimmy on, now that we're kind of looking back on over a year since the Atlantic article, how would you say that article has affected your lives, and what's the latest with how you're being treated by the local congregation?
Wow. Well, first, I want to just say that the Atlantic piece was a significant piece of journalism that I really feel had an impact on not just people that read it as Atlantic subscribers, but others who are investigating child sexual abuse cases. It led to a number of people coming forward to me personally, police investigators in several states. One actually contacted me through Facebook under an alias and immediately identified himself and said, I'm an investigator with such and such precinct. Here's all my data. You can call my office, etc. Turns out he was investigating child abuse cases in this particular state. Private investigators have reached out to me, such as the ones in the Montana, the new Montana cases that are going on, which, at the time I didn't, know about a year ago, but that's been in the works for a long time. A lot of journalists have reached out. And recently I had a discussion with someone I've never spoken to before. I think it's Peter Smith, who is a journalist. I'd like to give him a shout out. A journalist he used to be with a Kentucky newspaper, but now he's moved up to Pittsburgh and he covers religion for one of the Pittsburgh Gazette papers up there, a pretty big paper. And I know I'm getting a little off track from your question, so I'm going to bring myself right back to it. But I want to just give a shout out to the work that Peter did, because he's up for a Pulitzer now for his work. Now that he's moved to Pennsylvania, and he did a giant expose on Jehovah's Witnesses, and that was back when he interviewed the early work of Bill Bowen, William Bowen, down in Kentucky, who did some fantastic work down there, and really pushed the envelope very hard for people to understand what was going on in the organization. And he quit being an elder because of the child abuse problems. But Peter covered that whole massive exposure down there in Kentucky and interviewed Mario Moreno, Watchtower's attorney, and a whole bunch of people, everybody involved, abuse survivors. Then moves up to Pennsylvania. 19 years later, he's covering this Amish and Mennonite child abuse problem. So the Amish and Mennonite communities are very insular. And so he's already won awards and is up for a Pulitzer for his work. If anybody wants to read it, they can send me, maybe I'll post the links. But there's a bunch of articles that he did that are just absolutely brilliant, where he's traveled throughout Pennsylvania and gotten into the Amish and Mennonite communities. So that connection was partly due to the Atlantic and partly due to a mutual friend up in Pittsburgh that wanted me to meet him. So met so many journalists, police investigators, the Attorney General's office for Pennsylvania obviously contacted me right after the Atlantic article. And so, I've already talked about, my testimony at the grand jury. So not much more to say about that. That is still an ongoing investigation. And so anyone that's in Pennsylvania or any state really that has a story and wants to reach out to the office of the Attorney General of Pennsylvania, please do so. So yeah, that article's had a lot of impact. And as far as the second part of your question, maybe Kimmy can answer, or I'm not sure what.
Yeah, because I'm interested to know what impact it's had on you. I mean, looking back on, again, it's been over a year now, maybe 14 or 15 months since the article. So what impact has it had locally and in terms of your family since it all went?
Aside from being disfellowshipped?
Aside from being disfellowshipped. Well, I'm talking about that as being one of the consequences. So basically, what has, not just the article, but the disfellowshipping, what impact has all that had on your lives?
So, going back to January, so the article was March of 2019. Going back to January, my father passed away. He was 80 years old. My mother is now 79, and they were married 57 years. So he passes away. My mother has no one else. I'm an only child, so I take care of her. And the Atlantic article came out in March. Elders were at our door the very next day. Within weeks, they were sending us certified letters almost identical to the one that Brandon received. It was like a form letter. except Brandon's had one accusation. Ours said causing divisions, and it was a letter to me and it was a letter to Kimmy. And they were trying to, after having not been anywhere near that Kingdom Hall for 5 years, they suddenly want us to come to a judicial meeting at 6 p.m. and then Kimmy at 6:45 p.m. So, long story short, I told them to stop harassing us, and they went ahead and disfellowshipped us and didn't notify us. As far as I know, no one's ever told me I'm disfellowshipped, except the word passes down the line. And there's more to that, but so they do that, but that has a terrible effect on my mother because, some idiot immediately, some alcoholic JW picks up the phone and calls my mother and says, "Oh, Mark's disfellowshipped," and then she hears it from this idiot that I'm not even going to go into this guy, but what's the point? And so she's with a point where she just wanted to just lay down and
wasn't
die.
Toni Morris, was it? I'm trying to think how many alcoholic JWs I know about.
Oh my God! Well, yeah,
sure.
The list is endless because a lot of them self-medicate that way. But so I don't want to speak for Kimmy. As far as myself, because my mother is, a devoted JW, and I support her beliefs. And, I take care of her every day and get all of her food and groceries. And
you support her right to her beliefs. I'm pretty sure you don't support the beliefs themselves. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. She gets what she wants because
not hurting anyone.
She's my mother, and she just wants to be a good. She respects the work that I do. I think she understands. She believes me. She believes exactly. She knows that it's not. I'm not lying because she knows me. She knows I'm not a liar.
She's actually proud of Mark. The big turning point for her was when she asked Mark, "Are you only coming after Watchtower, or do you care about everyone in general, all kids from all faiths?" And when she realized that, Mark wasn't just trying to target Jehovah's Witnesses because he was bitter, I think that was a turning point for her. So she's been extremely supportive. She won't shun us. She recognizes that it's bullying. But at one point, like Mark was saying, she was being forced to choose, and she wanted to die rather than have to choose. So for me, I don't talk to my Jehovah's Witness mother. The one good thing about it is that she has stopped sending me messages because I'm disfellowshipped now. So that's kind of an irony there. And I've had a lot of people reach out to me, as well as Mark, that they were current Jehovah's Witnesses. They read our article in the Atlantic, and it started them down a rabbit hole, and they left. So it was a difficult story to tell for me personally, and I'm glad I did that. And I try and support any survivor that wants to come forward. And I also support those that don't, so everyone has a time and a place and the right to tell their story how they wish. But I don't really have contact with anyone else. There's a couple sisters in our former congregation that are PMO that I talk to on the regular, that two of them were scared when the whole coronavirus thing hit, worrying if the Jehovah's Witnesses were right. And I was able to kind of talk them off a cliff that they were thinking about going back. But that, other than that, I think, that's kind of that's all I have to say on this.
Okay.
So, I want to say that anybody that wants to reach out to me that's from, my former congregation in Maryland or any other of the congregations. I knew a lot of people. I did RBC work all over Maryland and Delaware, and we've had a number of people. Kimmy kind of alluded to it a little bit. We've had a number of people reach out, and so, we're not actively going in there and trying to pull people out of the congregation, but it's just, it's a byproduct of all of our work, that people will see, what we're saying and doing, and they can judge for themselves if it's factual and if it's relevant and important. And they can reach out to us at any time. They'll remain, we'll keep their information. If we know them, obviously it's not confidential, but we'll keep those conversations confidential because we do care about you. We're not angry. Look, we were all in this position. We're not angry apostates. The only thing we're angry about is the organization's cover up of all these things and their treatment of people, their blood policy, the shunning policy. These are inanimate objects that we can be angry about without hating people. And so we do the work that is, you've alluded to your work, Lloyd, in that a lot of it you can't talk about right now, but in the ICSA investigation going on in the UK. So that's going to be like what you mentioned, the Australian Royal Commission. That's going to wake a lot of people up. Because what I find is that the average witness doesn't really know what they're signing up for.
Mm-mm.
So we talked about this in our WhatsApp group the other day. So I got a video from Brazil, and in fact, I have a redacted copy of it now. So there's a young man who is probably at best 9 years old, and so he was basically baptized by Zoom. So they have this Zoom meeting going on, and his parents are all at the house. And he's standing there like a statue in front of the screen with the speaker giving the baptism talk. And, he couldn't be any more than 8 or 9 years of age. And you could hear him, in Portuguese, answering yes to the baptismal questions.
See.
And then they march him up the stairs and he gets changed and they put him in a bathtub and they baptize him. And this kid doesn't understand the contract that he is signing. He doesn't understand how, as a baptized witness, they retain your data forever, your date of baptism, date of birth, your name, your status in the congregation. If this kid ever decides to leave the organization and live his own life, he cannot do that without the most severe of consequences, losing his family, friends, being disfellowshipped. Now, I know the witnesses are going to say, oh, you don't have to be disfellowshipped. But yeah, you lose everything, regardless of whether you're disfellowshipped or not. So that really struck me. We all seen young kids get baptized, but it's still going on. Even with the coronavirus, they're still having assemblies, baptizing young kids. They need to know that they're signing up for something that subjects them to judicial committees, and they're just too young for that. I mean, you can't have a kid sign a contract, even though that's what he's doing, but they're just too young to know what's involved in these judicial hearings that the elders hold. I'm just thinking about this other case that was just a whole bunch of documents were just leaked to me that someone took from a congregation, and I just can't believe it. It's a guy who was arrested for, there were several cases, but a man was arrested for sexually abusing his stepdaughter that he adopted I think he adopted her when she was 13, and when she turned 15, he started sexually having a sexual relationship with her. And this, I can't even get into, I mean, he was like 41, she's 15. And the first thing that the elders do is they say, well, was she a willing participant?
Yeah.
It's just
that source of language shouldn't even be on anyone's lips when we're dealing with children. I just want to read some of the comments that were coming in from people who were following, what you were saying about the Atlantic article and the aftermath. Good for you, Mark and Kimmy. My dad is still of the thinking that the elders are more honest than actual evidence. Julia Dasmin says, let's call it being set free rather than being disfellowshipped. Rianne has big hugs for Kimmy. Vicky Griffin, oh, hang on, it's jumped forward. Do you guys know Vicky Griffin Dane?
Yeah, Vicky's a friend of ours. I grew up with her.
Okay.
Yeah.
Knowing Mark and Kimmy personally is why I'm here. I was terrified of apostates and believed they lie. I'm here because I trust their record. So I think it's safe to say that you are having an impact in your community.
Hey, Vicky, great to see you. And I want to give everybody a special shout out directed to Vicky for, and Lloyd, you're not gonna want to hear this, but Vicky had a very rare publication that she so kindly granted me for my curio cabinet. And it's a 1918 paper edition of The Finished Mystery, which is, I think, the rarest edition of The Finished Mystery.
You mean a paperback?
It's the March
They
1st.
published it in the Watchtower.
Yeah, I can go get it if you want to see it.
Come on, I've got to see it now. You've got to show me that.
You've got to see it. Okay. All right. So, but thank you, Vicky, and you guys talk amongst yourselves, and I'll get it. But you'll drool on it. So it's pretty cool. It's kind of in fragile shape, but stand by.
Nice to see Jay in the comments.
Hey, Jay.
Jay recently did a fantastic job, along with Phil, in helping me go through all of the various governing body members and their backgrounds. So, yeah, really appreciate what Jay and Phil did in helping me get those videos done. Lip Locked No More says, as a PMO and friend of Mark, I can guarantee if you reach out to him, sorry, he will protect your anonymity. Robert Conway says, the average witness definitely doesn't know about these cases. They are told it's all lies if they discover it at all while in. Show me this.
Transparency.
Absolutely. Show me this finished mystery, Mark.
Did I mute myself? Hey, am I giving you guys any feedback today?
Nope.
No, we can hear you.
No.
I don't mean metaphorically. Yeah, because I actually don't have my audio routed. It's actually coming out of my computer screen, so it's not actually routing through here. And I was going to change that, but I didn't want to disrupt and make settings changes in the middle of the program. So just let me know if you're getting
everything's fine. Yeah,
feedback. Good to hear it. So I can ditch the headphones. But this is
yeah. Okay, yeah, that is rare.
So this is pretty thick. So I'll tell you, it's got. Let me see.
I'd love to know the story behind the fingerprints on the front cover.
Yeah, mostly like a ball print.
I will say that Vicky told me that years ago she was helping someone clean out their home. I think they had 2 of those. She gave one to her congregation, and then she kept one. And Vicky recently closed her business to start new adventures, and she found it, and then she passed it down to Mark.
There. Wow.
Fantastic.
So it's the March 1st, 1918, is it, Mark? March 1st, 1918?
Correct. Correct.
Brilliant. I mean, I've got Abigail Parker very kindly donated a 1917 finished mystery, which I've used already in multiple videos, and I also used it while researching The Reluctant Apostate, but I've never seen before a paperback version. Yeah, that's fascinating.
Yeah, I think this is actually page 232.
Yeah,
so that would be the end. But they had some pretty good graphics. See if I can.
Is that a Mars Attacks person? What is it? Oh, okay.
When you say good graphics, do you mean as in technically good, or the content?
Well, I mean that in disturbing. The context of. So we all know that Watchtower was a publishing corporation since the 1800s, and they were Watchtower, Pennsylvania, incorporated in 1884 under its previous name. And I think Charles Russell was really brilliant in that from a business standpoint, the business of religion. He didn't initially publish everything himself. He went to publishing houses in Philadelphia and other. Okay, here's Vicky saying. That was found in a warehouse for boats. I opened a box and it was on top. There were hundreds of boxes and I couldn't believe I found it.
Wow.
Thank you, Vicky.
Fascinating.
I'll show the cover again. But, the printing companies back then, Russell spent a lot of money. And I think what a lot of people don't realize is that they really were making money off of these publications, even though the witnesses like to put the narrative out there that it was a not-for-profit corporation and that people were they were given free whenever they couldn't afford it. They were given free literature. But the reality was they advertised the crap out of this stuff, like the finished mystery set, for example. I mean, there's thousands of advertisements that they put out in the form of flyers and in the Watchtower. So you could buy a set of finished mystery books, like the volumes 1 through 6, depending on what time period
studies in the scriptures.
Studies in the scriptures.
Yeah.
Sorry. And, thank you. The Studies in Scriptures, volume 1 through 6, which is Russell's, revision of the Millennial Dawn series. So you could buy that for like $6 for a box set, but those were like, say, $1914 or $1912. which in today's US dollars
Inflation.
is equivalent of over $60. So, $60 is not chump change for somebody who's, struggling to earn a living, and they're just not going to spend $60 nowadays if they're trying to feed their kids. But the coal porters or the pioneers who were selling this stuff, they were making at least 50% profit off of that. So you had the coal porter price and you had the public price. They were buying and selling, and there were people, the society was encouraging these coal porters to make a living off of that. And many of them they were traveling around the United States, and they were buying at wholesale, selling at retail, and they were using this money, and also the donations they would get from people.
But weren't there some that, Mark, weren't actually Bible students that were selling the literature? Didn't you tell me that?
Yeah, there wasn't. We should do a show on some of that whole thing, because it's very interesting, and I'll bet Phil from the Blue Envelope would absolutely love to dig into this, because the stuff going back to Rutherford and Rutherford's years, I mean, it's absolutely fascinating. For example, I could show you guys. We'll do it on another program, but I've got all of these old slips that from Rutherford's era, where they had not just publishers and pioneers, but they had sharpshooters, for example. And the sharpshooter, that was a big thing back then. So if you were a witness and you were a sharpshooter, you weren't necessarily somebody who was a regular pioneer. You were just a witness who, many of them didn't even really go into the public ministry. They would just sell the publications, or, it was sort of like their way of doing it without knocking on doors. And maybe we can get some people to comment on that. But if you look
the thing I find most interesting about the Finnish mystery in particular, it's kind of alluded to here by Vicky. That publication was banned for 2 years until it was allowed to be released. Watchtower is very, very clever in how it alludes to the finished mystery in the Revelation Climax book in particular, without actually quoting from it. So in other words, they appeal to the controversy surrounding the book rather than the actual content.
Yes.
If they were to actually be honest about the content, it would open quite a few eyes. But the whole purpose behind the controversy and the fact that it essentially led to Rutherford and his associates being imprisoned, which of course was interpreted as fulfillment of Bible prophecy, the whole reason for all of that was some pages that amounted to anti-war propaganda, a good chunk of which were actually written by a member of the clergy of Babylon the Great. So they weren't even written, these pages in particular, that led to Rutherford and his associates mostly being imprisoned. There were other reasons, but the main reason was these pages. These pages weren't even written by the faithful slave. They were copy-pasted in by something that some reverend in New York had written that was so anti-war that it had actually been dropped as propaganda by the Germans on the Allied troops in World War I. That's how against America it was. So that's the whole reason for Rutherford going to prison. Without Rutherford going to prison and being released in 1919, you probably wouldn't have the slave teaching to begin with. So that's why the Finnish mystery is so fascinating to me.
Yeah, they really were concerned that what was going on with Rutherford and his cronies was that they were violating the Sedition Act. And the Sedition Act came in towards the end of the First World War, where they were trying to go after
the Espionage Act, you mean?
Sorry. Yeah. Okay. So they were accused of sedition under the Espionage Act. Correct. Sorry. So the Espionage Act, right? They were trying to protect the country's interests in that the pieces of the Finnish mystery that they were concerned about were against, let's see, they viewed it as going against people being conscripted into the military. And when you do that, the government says, hey, wait a minute, you're encouraging people not to defend our country, and that violates the Espionage Act. And that's why they did it. As soon as the war was over, they let him go. There we go. Finnish mystery. We could even compare. As Brandon, your microphone is
face off.
Sorry, mine actually doesn't have the pages torn out. that were supposed to be torn out.
So yours doesn't have the pages torn out.
If you can tell me the page number, I can go to it. I don't remember where it was, but yeah, I checked it in the past. I guess they sent out a memo, like we posted on the information board, that if you had a copy of it, to tear that page out and get rid of it. But whoever had this book did not do that.
Wow.
Much to my benefit.
Well, anyway, before we go down a rabbit hole with this, I'd better bring the lockdown live stream to a conclusion, because we have passed the 90-minute mark by some margin. But it's been a fascinating conversation. And again, viewers, please do look out in the coming week for a Watchtower in Focus episode where we will be going through some of these most recent developments with relation to CSA with more detail. Mark's currently getting his head around it all, but once we know what's what, we'll present what information that we have. But it's been an absolute delight having my panel with me for this lockdown live stream, and thank you for joining me.
Thanks for having us.
Great chat, guys.
Hopefully, okay.
So viewers, thank you so much for tuning in for today's lockdown live stream. Please don't forget to stay safe and stay positive, and I will see you on the next show. Take care.